Venice, here you are on the screen.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Kevin Altucker. I'm the lead staff for the City of Eugene Ad Hoc Committee on Police Policy. This is meeting number 13 out of a total of 14. Today's date is April 7th, 2021. We're meeting virtually via Zoom because we're complying with Governor Brown's executive order, stay home and save lives. I've just got a few very short announcements, kind of news items to share with you this evening, and then I'm going to pass the microphone over to Kaz. So the first thing that I'd like to say, of course, is welcome everybody. Welcome committee members. We appreciate your time. Welcome to city elected officials and other city personnel for joining us tonight, and also members of the general public who are attending. We are without Mo, as you know. She completed her obligation and is off doing other things this evening. And so you're stuck with Kaz and myself, and we will do our best to facilitate the meeting. Kaz is going to take the lead, and I will be in a support role. The last meeting on April 21st will be dedicated entirely to reviewing and approving the report. Now, we sent to you a draft, a very drafty draft of the report late this afternoon. We don't expect to have you have had time to read that, but we do want it in front of you when Kaz introduces it later on in the meeting. So keep that in mind. With that, Kaz, the microphone is yours.
Okay, well, first of all, some of my colleagues have asked me to let the members of this committee know that the City of Eugene is inviting organizations to participate in an equity panel, and that will be to advise staff on making sure that the programs that we put together are designed in an equitable way. So if you're interested or your organization is interested, some of you may have already received an email. Please contact me and I will pass your details on to my colleagues. I think that this group is probably very likely to be interested in that kind of work. So that's my one announcement. My next thing is I have to apologize. I'm just not as good as Mo is at this stuff. So I'm sorry if things are a bit clunky this evening. And with that, I will attempt to share my screen and show you a brief presentation, which is just to go over the report and the status of it and some of the ideas that we had while we were putting it together. So the first thing that I'd like to cover is its purpose as we understand it. So it is to give a clear and accurate account of the committee's decisions and discussions. And the reason for that is to equip the City Council with the information needed to make the changes that meet the aspirations of BIPOC and other marginalized groups. And then it's also intended to act as a reference for staff tasked with actually implementing any proposals that end up being agreed. So this is what has informed the way that we've put the report together. Our guiding principles were, first of all, that clarity and readability were paramount. We've done a lot of work in this committee, and it's a testament to the level of dedication of committee members, just how much information has been through this committee. But finding a way of making sure that that is sweated down to the minimum necessary to understand what the committee is trying to get to has been a real challenge. We've I believe, struck a balance there, but obviously it is ultimately the committee itself that can decide that. Secondly, this will be the first step in a longer process. These recommendations will have to be looked at by City Council, and from there on, decisions will need to be made that are outside of the scope of the facilitation team to make any decisions on. The third thing is that it will form the basis of future working documents. So one of the decisions we've made, which I'll get to in a moment, is to put quite a lot of information in the appendices. And the idea there is that you should be able to get from the main report an understanding of what the committee wanted to achieve, without needing to dive into some of the really deep details. But if you want to go into those details, you should also be able to do so. Finally, as we've discussed before, there can be multiple solutions to the same problem. Wherever possible, we've tried to make it very clear that different suggestions are being put forward. And finally, and this is more of a principle in drafting, we tried to stress again and again that whilst marginalized groups have many common experiences, there is no one voice of the marginalized community. Different members have different experiences and different priorities. So, we don't expect to be able to meet all of those priorities through this report, but we've done our best to kind of find that middle ground, that sweet spot where everybody can hopefully agree on what the key areas are. And so with that, I'll go over some of the things. These were all in the email that was shared with you a little earlier today. It's a draft. It's very much still a draft. You are very welcome to share it with the organizations you represent, but we're asking you to not publish or distribute it more widely, simply because it is still a working document. You'll note that some sections are blank: the summary of recommendations, next steps, the conclusion, the contents page, because these things are going to be subject to change as the approval process goes on. Our aim is to collate your feedback in the next week to 10 days, and then to be much closer to a final piece of work. As you look through the document and you get through the motions, you'll see that the pathway to implementation section for each motion is currently blank. It's become clear as the work of the committee's progressed that it is a huge task requiring the expertise of many different people within the organization to make sure that that work is as clear and accurate as possible. And neither Kevin nor I felt comfortable proceeding with that work on our own. We need to bring in a lot more expertise, and we wanted to make sure the report itself was completed. And then finally, on this one, we're still collating the appendices, which will be circulated when the next draft, which includes members' comments, is ready. There are still some outstanding motions from the Independent Investigation Prosecution Subcommittee, some on hiring and training, which have been brought by Leah because the committee in question didn't actually meet quorum for its second meeting. So we've had to do a bit of a workaround on that one. There are also some motions that didn't go through the full committee process, which in the summary of motions, which is available on the website, and a few of you have also requested, they are labeled AHCPP and then the number. Once the work of the committee is done, we will put these into the most appropriate sections, or if they don't fit into a section, then we'll give them after at the end of the report in their own section. And again, we tried to maximize readability, so people have submitted things in the 3-question format. We tried, but it proved very difficult to get that into a succinct form. So the first appendix will be all of the motions submitted in that format. Now will it be available for reference to anybody who wants to dive deep. There's also the survey, and again, you're invited to complete that if you haven't done so already. And we will highlight those the items that come up in the survey, both in the executive summary and then in their own section in the report, which of course isn't complete yet. And really what we're asking for as well is some guidance from members, either in tonight's committee meeting or separately via email, on how to incorporate some of the suggestions that were made by community members that gave testimony back in February. We very much need your guidance on that to see how best to proceed. And then finally, we've included the Human Rights Commission's feedback, their summary, in this report, simply because they're the only organization that has currently provided us with both testimony and a 250-word summary. So if you're wondering why your organization's testimony isn't included, it's because we haven't received the summary from you. Hopefully the HRC's summary will give an indication of the sort of feedback that we're hoping to receive. In terms of next step, we're asking for your feedback on 3 areas, really. Completeness: did we miss any motions or amendments? Accuracy: did we capture everything? The tone of the discussions and the concerns of committee members, especially when it comes to areas where there was some significant dissent between different members. We really want to make sure that we caught everything that was said. And then finally, presentation. Did we strike the right balance between readability and giving enough contextualizing information? And then finally, in terms of next steps, we're asking you to feed back by next Wednesday, the 14th of April, so that we have time to incorporate the comments before the next meeting of the committee on the 21st. The finalized report will go to council on the 30th of April, after which point council will need to, that's again outside of our scope. It's up to council what happens after this process is complete. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And if anybody has any questions, please go ahead. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. So I'm hoping that's because I was very clear rather than because I was so obtuse that nobody knows what to ask. Brian, I see you. Go ahead, Brian. You got your hand raised.
There it is. It was, yes.
Yep.
I was just curious, when you talked about only one organization provided a summary, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that did not include the letter from Cahoots. And if that's true, why not?
So Cahoots is not a member of the committee. What has come to us from Cahoots will be included along with all of the other testimony that we've received from committee members and outside organizations during the process. What we've asked members for is for organizations, and when it comes to mayor's appointees, individuals, if they wish to do so, may submit testimony that is as long as they wish it to be. But we've also asked for a 250-word summary of that so that it can be included in the report, again, striking that balance between readability and contextualization. So for example, the HRC has submitted both of those documents. Transponder have submitted the longer document and may well choose to submit a summary, but they have not yet done so, which is why in the document you see before you, you won't see that, even though it's something that's been circulated to the committee and has been discussed in these meetings. I hope that answers your question.
It certainly does, and very thorough. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I'll just cast about, see if there are any further questions, and then I think we can dive straight in.
I just want to add that the NACP will be submitting our document very soon.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibrahim. Right, so, and this is where it gets tricky, because in the previous meetings I've been sharing my screen and Mo has been facilitating. So perhaps Kevin, if you are able to share your screen so that people can see the motions, which is something that's been requested previously.
Yep, I can do that, Kaz. Let me do that right now. There we are. I trust everyone can see that.
It looks good to me. And as has been previously stated, I then can't see you if you raise your hand, so I have to flick through. This is IIP motion 108, which reads, in reviewing a complaint of police misconduct, the CRB shall consider the entire event, not just the immediate events leading up to an incident of possible misconduct, including specifically whether the officers involved initiated or escalated the incident. The CRB may also consider the officer's history of prior complaints and sustained allegations. Can I get a proposer for that motion in a second, and then we can have some discussion?
So moved.
Thank you, Brian.
I have a question, a process question.
Go ahead.
Is this the one that was very similar to the one that we passed last time that Daniel felt was worded a little better than the one that we passed, but they're pretty much identical?
Yes, I believe it is. Kevin?
Yep, I agree.
Yep. So we can simply choose to not discuss this one if the committee feels that it's already been covered or it's redundant. Thank you for bringing that up, Marty.
I wonder what Daniel wants to do and if he want this one to replace the other one. I don't know.
I think in the interest of time, perhaps the best thing would be to skip this for now if we have time to come back and to vote on whether we want this motion to supersede the one that we approved last time.
Okay, well, we haven't had a second for the motion, so if nobody decides to second it, then we can simply move on to the next one. And again, I will apologize. I'm just not as good at this as Mo.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ibrahim.
It is my understanding that we can submit all the motions that we have, and we don't have to like get rid of this or the one before this, and we can submit all of them.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure I follow. This came up from the Independent Investigation and Prosecution Subcommittee.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting we do it as an omnibus, or?
Well, no, I'm just saying that this motion, the previous one that we passed, this motion is not conflicting with that one, or we do not have to consider removing this motion because we have passed another motion that seems similar.
Sure, absolutely. So the suggestion was.
I think this is a little bit different. I think I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the situation where there were different models of how the CRB should play out its jurisdiction, and we didn't have to have them compete with each other. But this is not competing motions. It was just that the Community Oversight Subcommittee made this proposal, and then again, the Independent Investigations Group made this proposal again, and the wording's a little different, but it's pretty much the same thing.
Yes, it is pretty much the same thing, and I get that because there's the motion on the table.
There isn't yet. We've had a proposal, but no
So
second.
I don't know if we should address that motion with the understanding that we already have passed a motion like this, or the subcommittee can withdraw this motion instead of us deciding that there is another motion that has been approved that seems similar.
So yeah, Ibrahim, it hasn't actually been seconded yet, so I don't believe it's on the table. So if somebody wants to second it, we can go through the process of voting for it, or if I get no second, then we can move on to the next motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. In which case, do we have any discussion? I'm not seeing anyone. In which case, I'd like to take a roll call.
I think Rick has his hand up.
Rick, go ahead.
Yes, I did have my hand up. I just have one comment, and that is on the second sentence of it. I think that this differs substantially. It basically allows for the CRB to have the officer's history, in other words, personnel record, and that would be violative of the current laws of their existence. That issue of prior complaints and prior sustained allegations may be important in a disciplinary aspect of the case, which would be taken up by what has been discussed as being part of the matrix, but it should not be an issue regarding whether or not the person is guilty of the offense at this particular time. It's irrelevant.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any other comments? Just clicking through, can't see anyone. I don't see anyone. So are we happy to vote on this motion? Okay, again, not seeing any countervailing proposals. So Kevin, if you wouldn't mind doing the roll call.
Sure, be happy to. I'm going to start at the top of the list with Ems,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Maisie,
Yes.
Ibrahim Koulibaly,
Yes.
Leah Edelman,
Yes.
Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
I don't see Lindsay. Ib,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Guadalupe,
Yes.
Rick Rosetta,
No.
David,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Midas,
Yes.
Midas, thank you, got that. Marty,
Yes.
all right, the vote count is 14 yes, 1 no.
Okay, motion passes.
Kevin,
Now,
I just joined, but I would be an abstain from that particular vote.
was that Silverio?
Yes,
Okay,
Thank
we'll
you.
put you down. We'll put you down as an abstain as well.
Thank you.
We've been counting abstentions. So IIP 109, in mediation sessions with EPD officers, civilian complainants shall have the ability to have a non-legal advisor present. The advisor would be able to guide them through the process and inform them of their rights and responsibilities in the process. Can I have a proposer?
I move to approve this motion.
Okay, Daniel, and a second.
I'll second it.
Was that Ib?
Yep.
Okay. And do we have any discussion?
Daniel's got his hand up.
Okay, Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, so my understanding is that mediation is not frequently used. However, my thoughts on this were that if the oversight and discipline were strengthened, that there might be an increased incentive for officers to agree to a mediation process. Currently, in mediation, neither side may have any representation. The only representation that would be allowed, it would just be the two parties, the officer and the civilian, and a mediator. A translator is allowed. However, this doesn't seem to me to be a level playing field, in that you have one party, the officer, who is familiar with the process and who is trained and schooled in their rights and in the process, with a civilian who might be very unfamiliar with that. And so it seemed to me to level the playing field that that the civilian should be able to have an advisor, non-legal, who could guide them through the process and give them information throughout the mediation process.
Thank you, Daniel. Rick, I see you.
Yes, I'm curious, Daniel, maybe you could answer the question, and that is, what would the mediation be in reference to? Would it be referencing the dispute that would be arising in front of what you claim would contend would be the role of the CRB at this point? Or
Yes, exactly. This is a process which I didn't know about and which I learned about through reading the police union contract, and then went and looked on, I believe it was a police auditor's site, that the mediation could occur only if and only if both parties agreed to it. And then this would be in lieu of the civilian complaint process. In that
you're saying that the parties could settle the matter?
The parties could settle the matter
In
through
what way?
mediation.
In what way? What are you talking about? The officer paying them some money or something?
No, this would be basically the officer saying, yeah, I messed up. I said something or did something that I shouldn't have. And the civilian basically accepting the apology and it being it being more of a learning process and a community relationship building process, as opposed to any kind of adversarial or disciplinary process.
So you're basically saying that this would be a change in the city council or the city ordinance regarding what the police auditor is doing, because it's the police auditor's responsibility right now to make sure that the complaints are being answered and handled.
Yeah, and I'm afraid I'm a little fuzzy on the details of whether the officer could then still get disciplined for that action, but I don't think so. I think it's something that, again, both parties would need to agree to. I don't know to what extent the process include the current mediation process includes any reparations or restorative action, and maybe if there's someone who could answer that question, that might shed a little light on it. And again, my understanding is that these mediation sessions currently are hardly ever used, but yet they exist.
Yeah, I've never heard of it, so that was the reason I asked. Thank you.
Okay, I do see Ibrahim David and Leah Edelman, but I'd like to give Leah Pitcher the opportunity to address the point of fact in that question.
Hi, everyone. I don't mean to interrupt. I apologize. But as far as our mediation program right now, the reason Rick hasn't really seen a lot of those is because typically for allegations of misconduct, they don't go that route. It's rare for them to go that route, frankly, because it's rare for all the parties to want to go meet with a mediator. And in the times where they do, basically what happens is it removes the complaint from the typical investigation and disciplinary process. So for example, if someone files a complaint, the person and the officer agree to mediation, we send it to an outside mediation organization. And as long as everyone shows up and participates, that complaint is closed. That's how that works now.
Thank you for that, Leah. So I see Ibrahim.
Yes. Reading this motion, I have a few questions. First is, what is a non-legal advisor? Two is, if complainant have to come with their own non-legal advisor, what would happen if one cannot afford a non-legal advisor? Who would provide that? It is the city to have a such of person to advise all complainants, or all complainants have to find their own non-legal advisor and come to the meeting with the non-legal advisor. And in equity standpoint, what would happen if one know the non-legal advisor they want, but they cannot afford it, or if one need one, but they cannot afford it.
Okay, so I guess those questions are directed at Daniel. Daniel, are you happy to answer them?
Yeah, the idea was that this would be city staff who would serve in that role. And it specifically says non-legal advisor to avoid the then corresponding unleveling of the playing field where the civilian has legal representation, but the officer would not be allowed any legal representation or union representation. And so it would be a non-legal advisor. I didn't specify in the motion that it was city staff because I didn't want to get down into the weeds of details. But strictly to inform them and guide them through the process.
Thank you, Daniel. I see David and then Leah Edelman. David, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so one of my questions was, who's going to cover the cost of the non-legal advisor? So it sounds like the idea is that it would possibly be staff from the city. And I don't know if is that a conflict of interest? So that's one thing. And then the other question that I had was, I guess I can't assume that the officer has any more of a grasp of the mediation process than the civilian. So I'm not sure why they would get the opportunity to have non-legal advisor. The civilian would, but the officer wouldn't, because I don't know if that's an accurate assumption to make, I guess.
Okay, Daniel, would you like to answer either of those 2 points?
Well, given that this process is part of the officer's job, that it is spelled out in police policy, that it's referenced in the police union contract, I would say that I would expect that an EPD officer would know those things as part of his or her job, whereas it's not a civilian's job to know about this process.
Thank you. Leah Edelman.
It's okay. My questions got answered.
Okay. Then I see Brian Michaels.
Well, originally I was going to say that this is one of these motions where I completely understand where Rick is coming from and kind of see it as an impossibility. And then Leah spoke and said they already have this, and I'm still don't have a clear picture of somebody who's been beaten up or alleges they were beaten up by the police. What comes from a mediation? That's unclear. They get an apology, but is that really what all this is about? To get an apology from an independent mediator? It's very confusing to me.
Yeah, I think probably Leah Pitcher is best placed to answer that question. And then after Leah, I see Silverio.
Hi, I'm really trying to not talk very much in these because I want to listen to you guys, but so in a situation like that, Brian, where there's an allegation of excessive force, that would be one of those where it's pretty rare for everybody to agree to mediation. So that would go in the route of an allegation of misconduct investigation, and it wouldn't probably go to mediation.
Okay, then I go back to my original response is that this is one of those motions where it's just an impossibility, but it's good for the city council to hear what this committee has in mind, and that we have in mind the concept of mediation. I think is a good thing, as impossible as it is. And I've said this sort of thing before in some other motions that it's totally impractical, but it expresses our opinions to the city council, and it's well worth the city council hearing those opinions.
Thank you, Brian. Silverio, please go ahead.
So I'm going to say why I'm going to be voting no. It seems like this is just a policy that doesn't have any clear guidelines. Advisor would be somebody that's possibly hired through the city. That's not clear to me. And if it's a process that's already set into place, I'm going to be voting no on this motion.
Thank you for that. So I don't see any further hands raised. Does anyone else wish to discuss, or are we okay to move to a vote? Seeing no more hands. Kevin, are you okay to do the roll call?
I sure am, and I'm going to start at the top again with M's.
Abstain.
Abstain. Got it. Daniel.
Yes.
Betsy.
No.
Macy.
Abstain.
Ibrahim Koulibaly.
Yes.
Leah.
No.
Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
Ib.
Yes.
Brian.
Pardon me. Yes.
Silverio.
No.
Guadalupe.
Yes.
Rick Rosetta.
No.
David.
No.
Sandra.
Yes.
Midas.
Yes.
Marty.
Yes.
That's 9 yes, 5 no, and 2 abstentions, so that motion carries.
Thank you, Kevin. I do appreciate you taking on the roll calls. Our next one is IIP 111. Any IDFIT investigation into an EPD officer shall be made fully public.
So moved.
Thank you, Silverio.
Second.
Thank you, David. Do we have any discussion?
So as I understand it, IDFIT investigations are taking place from other departments, not necessarily in-house. So EPD should have some officers involved, but not necessarily majority of officers who are doing the investigation. Several of the different neighboring organizations and departments will have different officers made available for investigations into IDFIT. I was not a part of this conversation, but I do think that it's a good motion.
Thank you, Silverio. I'm just looking through. I see Ibrahim and nobody else so far. Ibrahim, please go ahead.
It is my, I hope the city attorney is on the call. It is my understanding that IDFIT investigation is under the purview of the DA, district attorney. Am I right or wrong?
I believe that to be the case, but if the city attorney would like to chime in, and then I see Leah as well after that.
That is correct. But if Leah wants to speak specifically to it, I believe. And when the district attorney, Patty Perlow, spoke with the group, she spoke specifically to the records, but when it comes to the city's ability, we're not the custodian of that record. I don't want to get too technical in public records law. So, but Kaz, as you stated it, that is accurate.
Okay. And I should clarify my Leah's there. That was Leah Edelman who was next.
Oh,
to me to speak
I apologize.
rather than pitch her. Sorry, Ibrahim, go ahead.
Thank you. So my concern is how are we going to implement this policy if the DA is overseeing the investigation?
I think either Leah Pitcher or the city attorney would be best placed to answer that question.
This could be another one of those motions where you are recommending a change to state law. So your intent and desire of having these be public is captured and actually reflects the desire of the committee, but it's a recommendation to advocate for a change at the state legislature.
Leah Edelman?
Yep, my question just got answered.
Okay. Just looking through, not seeing any further discussion. Silverio.
Yeah, just to press on that as well, we did ask for the city attorney, I believe, to make some changes regarding the immediate availability of any kind of video that's from any kind of use of force situation. So it would be in line with those same kind of recommendations and policy.
Thank you. Just looking through. I don't believe there's anybody else. So I think we can move to a vote. Kevin, maybe start from the bottom this time.
Sure, we'll start with Marty.
Yes.
Midas.
Yes.
Sandra.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Rick Rosetta.
Abstain.
Guadalupe.
Yes.
Silverio.
Aye.
Brian.
Yes.
Ib.
Yes.
Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
Leah.
Yes.
Ibrahim Kulabali.
Yes.
Macy.
Yes.
Betsy.
Yes.
Daniel.
Yes.
And Ims.
Yes.
All right, the vote count is 15 yes, 1 abstention. So that motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Our next motion again relates to IDFIT 112. The city shall advocate for meaningful civilian oversight of IDFIT investigations and the IDFIT process. Can I get a proposer?
So moved.
Is that Silverio?
It was.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Okay. Do I have any discussion?
How my hand up?
Ibrahim, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this motion because IDFIT investigation, to my understanding, is a criminal investigation, and having a civilian oversight over IDFIT investigation. To me, there is no way for us to be able to achieve, for the city to be able to achieve that. And again, if the city attorney may give us some guidance on this, I know it's maybe one of those motions why we are recommending that the city advocate for some law changes, maybe at the state or federal level. But I think this is a very, very, very long shot, and for now I'm going to vote against it.
Okay. I would like to invite the city attorney to address that point, but before I do, from my recollection, the subcommittee discussion was on the understanding that it was something that would require a new structure at the state level to engage in this oversight. But City Attorney, if you'd like to
Yeah,
add anything to that.
I would say that the motion captures that quite nicely. And so the city shall advocate for, I would say, gets at that need for advocating for the state law change. So I wouldn't recommend, I don't see a need to have additional changes if that's what you're trying to impart with the motion.
Okay, then I see Silverio. Please go ahead.
Yeah, there are some civilian components with IA investigations. I've been asked personally to be a part of some of those. There are none, as I understand it, for IDFIT investigations in particular.
Kaz, I want to bring to your attention a question that Marty has asked in the chat.
Yeah. Can investigations be reviewed after the fact? Ask the City Attorney. City Attorney, if you'd like to chime in.
So I don't have a really great answer. Can the investigation be reviewed after the fact? They can be read for sure. I guess I'm if you're looking for reviewed and then have changes or input, there's no process for that I'm aware of. I'm not an expert on the IDFIT. I would defer to Leah Pitcher more, but they can be reviewed. They are ultimately released. I see Leah has her hand up.
Thank you, Leah Pitcher. Please go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I was called to parent for a moment. Yeah, so when the IDFIT investigation is finished, it is forwarded to EPD Internal Affairs and our office. So we review it. An administrative investigation ensues where we look at any additional policy questions. And then that incident as a whole is reviewed by a deadly force review board that is made up of EPD staff. And then the auditor's office is on that board, but we are not a voting member of that board. And that board then makes a recommendation about whether or not the shooting and all of the other actions were within policy or not. And then that, once that's closed, can be reviewed at the CRB. So that's the system we have in place currently for IDFIT to get reviewed. I hope that helps. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Leah. I think that does help to clarify. Brian, I see you.
In terms of the public records law, while there's a pending investigation or a pending criminal charge, those all documents are excluded from public records. But once the criminal investigation is over, then the exclusion from public records disappears. And you can get police reports, you can get pretty much anything as a public records request. And, unless they actually charge a police officer with a crime, once they're done, it should be public records. It should be available through public records request because the criminal investigation is no longer pending. The criminal charge has been resolved, and therefore it's no longer excluded from public records.
Thank you. Brian, I see Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these points have been brought up, but to put them forward in summary, that in a similar way that that Eugene has a police auditor to oversee and monitor investigations from IA as they happen, there's currently no civilian oversight of IDFIT investigations while they are going on. Those don't need to be made public until they're completed, but I think that there does need to be some meaningful civilian oversight. Again, as the city attorney said, this would likely come at the state level, hence that the city should advocate for it. But right now, it all happens in the black box of law enforcement agencies, and that to me is not any kind of civilian oversight, let alone meaningful.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm just looking through. I don't see any other hands. Are we happy to move to a vote on this one? Brian, your hand is raised, but I think that was from your previous question.
That's correct. I didn't mean to raise it again.
Okay, not seeing any further hands raised for discussion. I'd like to suggest that we move to a vote.
Very well. We'll start with Marty.
Yes.
Midas.
Yes.
Sandra.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Rick Rosetta.
Yes.
Guadalupe.
Yes.
Silverio.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Ib.
Yes.
Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
Leah.
Yes.
Ibrahim Kulabali.
Abstain.
Macy.
Yes.
Betsy.
Yes.
Daniel.
Yes.
And Ims.
Yes.
The vote count is 15 yes, 0 no, 1 abstention. That motion carries.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And now we come to the last of our independent investigation and prosecution motions, 113. All CRB proceedings will be audio and/or video recorded and shall be made public. Do I have a proposer for that?
So move.
Thank you, Ibrahim. And a second?
I second.
Second. Oh, okay.
Was that Daniel first?
Yes.
Okay. And any discussion?
Clarify.
Sorry, who was that?
That's me.
Hey.
Yeah, clarifying question. Shall be made public, but it doesn't indicate when they're made public.
Would a member of the subcommittee like to speak to that point? Marty? Nope, your hand is up. So I appreciate you're not actually part of that subcommittee.
No, I didn't want to answer it. I have another question.
Oh, you have another question. I mean, it may well be that members want to put a clarifying friendly amendment to that. My understanding is that during the pandemic, these meetings have been recorded and made public. Prior to that, there's been some back and forth, but I would rely on Leah Pitcher or one of the CRB members who are on the committee to clarify that further.
Hi,
Okay.
it's Leah. If you want me to, I can, but
Please go ahead. I'm sorry I'm calling on you so much, but this
no,
is,
no worries
your
at all.
technical expertise is very valued in this.
I'm here for you. It's fine. Yeah, during the pandemic, yes, we have recorded all of our Zoom meetings and placed them on the city's YouTube. Prior to that, we typically do minutes, and we still are doing minutes. And then we've had various CRB votes on this, and we've done as the group wishes. So I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. I see Marty and then Silverio.
Yeah, so I just am curious to those who are on the CRB, or we could bother Leah Pitcher again. Is there anything about sensitive information where it could be affecting either party, that either party may not want certain things to be made public? Is there a way that gets handled currently?
This is Rick.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
you can jump in and I'll ask you to at the end, Leah. You're not off the hook. Typically, we try and do our best to use, we try not to identify people involved, but it's pretty clear who's involved by the facts of the case if anybody's been following closely. But we do not identify the individual. We call the complainant. We call the officer A or Officer B or Supervisor A or Supervisor B. So to some extent, we make whatever effort we can to keep that private, but if somebody was really into it, they could figure out who it was. That's all I really I can say on it. Leah, you might have something more.
Yeah, so just it's not because we are, well, on the officer side of things, the identifying information is protected by current public records law. So that is what limits us and requires us to ask CRB members to use Officer A, Officer B, and they, them pronouns. When there is a slip up and identifying information is included on a recording, we do our best to edit that out, but that is a costly and extraordinarily difficult process, at least for us. We haven't gotten that started yet. So, and then on the flip side, yes, absolutely. For the reporting parties, these are often the very worst moments of their lives, and airing their names and identifying information feels extraordinarily intrusive. So for instance, we never show video at CRB meetings. We keep it extremely, we try to keep it as non-identifiable as possible.
Thank you, Leah. I see Silverio and then Brian.
I just want to ask if this would change the requirements for the makeup of the CRB. I know right now that there's some extensive background checks, and how that might impact the process for those who are being asked to be on the CRB.
I think that might be you again, Leah, I'm afraid.
I was just thinking it might be. So yes, so as you said, Silver, CRB members have to go through a background check. I'm not sure how much this would add to it, but I do wonder if people knowing that they would be recorded discussing sensitive information, sometimes that could reduce our pool. I don't know. I'm not sure, Silver. I think that's a really good point, and I don't know that I have a very clear answer.
Thank you, Leah. And I see Brian.
I have two comments or suggestions as a friendly amendment. I think after the word public, put a comma and say consistent with the manner this was accomplished during the pandemic.
Ib, do you agree with that? And Daniel?
I would say that since it's already, they have already been doing it, so I don't think there's a need to add that, because it's just to make it like a regular process now, because they already have that in place.
Sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was Hamide who was the proposer, but I may have just messed up my notes.
No, I asked a question.
Right, you asked a question. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, wrong Ib or Ibrahim.
Well, this
Daniel?
was okay. I was going to say this was an answer to Kaz's initial question of how will this be accomplished, because it's sort of vague. So I was trying to address that question.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with Ibrahim. I don't think it needs qualification.
Okay.
I think that it's clear that that it needs to be a public process, and that transparency is key to that process.
Well, Brian, if you're happy with those answers, we can proceed. If not, you can propose an amendment, and we can look for a second.
No, I was just trying to help.
Sure.
The other comment is in response to Marty's comment. you know, like in lawsuits, when I sue the police, I get personnel records and things that I'm not allowed to get, but I get them under seal. So that without permission from the court, I cannot disclose them to anybody other than my client, who can't disclose them to anybody else. And so I think there should be something in here about things that are received under seal, except for items and testimony or documents and testimony that are received under seal.
Okay. Ibrahim and Daniel, would you be interested in entertaining an amendment along those lines?
I think, yes, there are going to be details about this that would need to get worked out, but I don't want those details to complicate the fundamental aspect of this motion, which is that the proceedings should be recorded and made public. How that happens to be consistent with all these other things, yeah, to me is the details that aren't that relevant to this motion.
And Ibrahim?
Yeah, I want to say that we're making a recommendation, and I'm pretty sure that the city attorney and city staff will advise the city on the existing laws and regulation, rules and regulations around this matter. I don't want us to try to be specific on matters that may suscitate more discussion and probably more concerns. The idea being that we wanted tape and we want that tape to be available to the public. Now, how we get there, how we get that done, I think we're gonna leave it to the city experts to subject matter experts to be able to figure that out.
Cass?
Go ahead, Daniel.
I think I do have an alternative wording that might clarify this, which is that to reword this, that all CRB public meetings will be audio and or video recorded. Because that would then, you know, there are some proceedings that aren't intended to be public, and that may get around some of that. But if there is if there is a meeting that, you know, in pandemic would be on Zoom, or in post-pandemic would be a live public meeting that anyone could attend, that those should be recorded. Does that help clarify things for people?
I think so. I need Ibrahim to agree to that. But before that, I see Silverio. Silverio, has your question been answered? Or are you still?
I just never lowered my hand. I'm sorry.
Right. Okay. Ibrahim, are you happy with that amendment?
My question is, what are the meetings, the CRB meetings that are not public meetings?
Okay, I think.
Well, I wasn't thinking meetings, as previously it said proceedings, and proceedings might be broader and might include things that aren't meetings. So.
So I think it would be all CRB public proceedings shall be audio and or video recorded. Are you happy with that change, Ibrahim?
Oh, yeah. No, it's for the sake of it.
Okay. So we've been through quite a lot of discussion on this one. Unless we have any other pressing issues, I would like to move to a vote. Maybe start from the top once you've managed to make that change. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I want to make sure that I've captured the changes. So what I have is all CRB public meetings shall be audio and or video recorded.
Yeah, and those recordings shall be made available to the public. Because
Right.
just recording
Yeah.
them doesn't make
Yeah.
the recordings public.
Sure, and that was part of the initial
Right.
motion.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give you a moment there.
Got it, I think. Okay. Let's see. Let's start with M's.
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Ibrahim Koulibaly,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Abdul Rahman,
Yes.
Ib,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Silverio,
Yes.
Guadalupe,
Yes.
Rick Rosetta,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Midas,
Yes.
thank you, and Marty.
Yes.
That vote is 16 with 0 no, so that motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kevin. Now we are moving on to motions on the subject of hiring and training, but not quite from the hiring and training subcommittee. Kevin has given in the agenda the context. We didn't reach quorum for the second meeting. And in terms of process, Leah and I then worked together to take the discussions that were put together. Leah sent me some motions and I assisted her in turning them into something that reflected those discussions. That's in the interests of full disclosure. So I'd like to invite Leah to speak and also to say that I believe that the draft that was circulated was not the final one. So Leah, if you have any changes and amendments, make them clear. The way that I'd like to proceed on this one is first of all to invite Leah to speak, and then Midas, who was also a subcommittee member. I believe this touches on some of the issues that you specifically raised. So I'd invite you to discuss those as well. So Leah, if you're happy to, would you like to go ahead and speak to the broad themes that are contained in these motions?
Yeah, I will start out by saying that these are these motions reflect the recommendations in the, you know, coming from the various organizations that we were using as support for this, and I'm very open to people's comments and if these need to be changed. But mostly what we wanted to address was just that there's a lot of information and evidence out there about how badly most training programs do in effectively really teaching police officers how to interact with communities, specifically how to interact with them in a way that not just understanding the community, but actually promotes you know, less violence. And so we really wanted to change that focus. And in listening to the representatives from the police department talk about their diversity training, it seemed to reflect a much more, I think, older version of diversity training, which is about, which to some degree puts the burden on those communities rather than looking at training police to have particular behaviors. The other issue is that those diversity trainings are often just treated separately and not really integrated into performance expectations and professional development. So oftentimes there aren't, for example, when officers are being reviewed, they don't have specific requirements that they're reviewed. Are they doing these particular actions? and then we heard a little bit about the hiring practices and recruitment, where there's some good intention, but two things that I noticed was, one, there's not a very good system for tracking that. So while we might be able to see outreach, I did not see where the results were. So I think with hiring and recruitment, there needs to be some way of seeing if those things are actually effective. And then kind of a reliance on recruitment that I think that it's often sort of felt like, well, we treat everybody the same. And so it's kind of neutral, but hearing that there are members from marginalized communities who did not experience that as neutral or welcoming, and so didn't feel confident in that, in following through on those recruitment efforts. So, okay, I hope that made sense. So these are the suggestions for addressing those.
Thank you very much, Leah. Midas, I'd like to invite you, if you wish to do so, to speak to some of these issues. But of course, I'm putting you on the spot, so feel free to say no to that.
Yeah, I don't really I'm not prepared to say much other than what was already mentioned. I'm just definitely offering my full support for everything that was just discussed.
Okay, thank you very much. So the first motion we have is HT 100, motion on integrating equity and community input into police training. EPD will work with community to develop a system to evaluate and modify all training programs and materials to ensure that they do not replicate patterns of systemic exclusion. This should be done with a focus on procedural justice, de-escalation and minimizing the use of force, relationship-based policing, crisis intervention, mediation and conflict resolution. This system should include a forum for ongoing community input into the content of training programs and the selection of training contractors. Do I have a proposer for that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Silverio. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I think that was
Sandra.
Hamide that got the second, just a little quicker than whoever else spoke. Any discussion? I see Guadalupe.
Yeah, I was wondering if somebody could explain to me what procedural justice means.
Daniel, you might be best equipped to field this one.
Procedural justice is a set of principles of training and policy that focus on developing relationships with communities and with rather than getting people to follow the law through punitive enforcement to get civilians to be collaborate. That's not the right word. My brain is not coming up with the right words for this. But it's essentially a way to have policing come from community values, and that people follow the law because they're aligned with community values, as opposed to an us versus them type of law enforcement.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm sorry to put you on the spot there, but this was a question that came up at the last committee meeting as well.
I had a better answer prepared for last time.
Thank you, Daniel. It's just one of those words that to me doesn't, I don't know what it says, I guess so, but I appreciate your response.
Well, and could I jump in?
Yeah, of course.
I think that so when we say procedural justice, it's actually a concept that is sort of recognized. It's not my language. And my understanding is that it's about being fair in the process, being transparent in the actions between the police force and the community, providing opportunity and access for community voice, and trying to look at ways to be more decision-making based on sort of community standards rather than some legal definition of what's legal or what's right or wrong. Which isn't to say it ignores what's right and wrong, but that can be sort of taking a position that there's oftentimes a lot of gray space around that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that, Leah. Do I have any further discussion or questions? Not seeing anything. So I'd like to get a roll call, please.
Sure, and we're going to start with Ems.
Yes.
Daniel.
Yes.
Betsy.
Yes.
Macy.
Yes.
Ibrahim Koulibaly.
Yes. Yes.
Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
Ib.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Silverio.
Yes.
Guadalupe.
Yes.
Rick Rosetta.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Sandra.
Yes.
Midas.
Yes.
And Marty.
Yes.
That's a unanimous 16 yes, 0 no. That passes.
I think Erica has also just joined us if she didn't get into the roll
Oh,
call.
thanks. Thank you, Kaz. Yeah, I can't see folks. Erica.
Yes, I'm sorry I arrived late.
We appreciate you being here. Thank you. So that vote is 17 yes and 0 no.
Okay. Moving on to the next one, HT 101, motion on training for appropriate engagement with marginalized groups. EPD will work with the City of Eugene's HR department and external diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants to review its training and procedures on engagement/contact with marginalized groups, including but not limited to BIPOC, youth, LGBTQ, transgender, and gender non-conforming individuals, English language learners, individuals from different religious affiliations, individuals who are differently abled. The aim of this review will be to identify exclusionary practices and behaviors and develop strategies for improving them. Can I get a proposer?
Yes.
Leah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ems. Any discussion? I see Macy.
Hello, I'm curious when drafting this motion, why was individuals who are differently abled used? Because as a person who is disabled, the term differently abled isn't correct. And so I'm proposing that be changed to disabled, please. Thank you.
Okay. Leah and Ems, can I get, is that an amendment you're happy to have made?
That is fine with me, and if there's any other folks in the group that would like to speak to that, I would like to hear it too.
Leah, you happy for that as well?
Yeah, and I'll admit, I took the language from another document. So I'm happy to be corrected.
Does that answer your concern, Macy?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not
Can I-
seeing. Sorry, Leah.
So actually, I should have fixed this, but I didn't see it. But perhaps we should rephrase it to say individuals who have disabilities. But Maisie, I will also defer to you.
So in my experience, it is individuals who are disabled because it's person first language rather than disability first. And so for me, saying individuals who are disabled sounds more correct because it is person first rather than disability first.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that correction.
Of course.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on either the language or the substance, or are we happy to proceed to a vote? I'm flicking through. I'm not seeing anyone. Kevin, are you ready with your roll call?
I am, and we're going to start with Marty.
Yes.
Midas.
Yes.
Sandra.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Rick Rosetta.
Yes.
Guadalupe.
Yes.
Silverio.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Ib.
Yes.
Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
Leah.
Yes.
Ibrahim Kulabali.
Yes, I would like to point out that you will probably need to do more research about individuals who are disabled. I think there is a different recommendation from the American Disability Act about calling people a certain way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. We'll look into that and ensure that the final report reflects the committee as a whole, especially those members that have personal experience. Thank you for raising that point. Please go ahead, Kevin.
Macy.
Yes.
Betsy.
Yes.
Daniel.
Yes.
And Ims.
Yes.
That's 17 yes and 0 no.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Now we move on to HT 102, motion on recruiting EPD staff from marginalized groups. EPD will work with the City of Eugene's HR department and external diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants to review its hiring practices to ensure that outreach to potential recruits from marginalized groups is in line with DEI best practice. Can I get a proposer for that motion?
I will.
Thank you, Leah. And a second?
A second.
Thank you, Sandra. Do I have any discussion? Macy, I see your hand, but I think that's from earlier.
Correct, sorry.
No problem. I'm not seeing anyone either raising their hand or waving. Are we happy to move to a vote on that one? I think that appears to be the case. Mr. Altucker, if you would be so kind.
Yes, and we'll start with Marty.
Yes.
Midas.
Yes.
Sandra.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Rick Rosetta.
Yes.
Yes.
Silverio.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Erica,
Yes.
Ib,
Yes.
Abdul Rahman,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Ibrahim Koulibaly,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
Ems.
Yes.
That's another 17-0, so that vote carries.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone, once again. Now we're on to HT 103, Motion on Staff Retention and Professional Development. This one runs a little long, so please bear with me. EPD will work with the City of Eugene's HR department and external diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants to review its policies for fostering an inclusive workplace culture and develop a plan to improve the experience of EPD employees from marginalized groups. The plan should include increased mentorship and professional development opportunities for members of marginalized groups, as well as a metrics-based system for assessing EPD's performance in these areas, for example, by tracking and regularly reporting the hiring, retention, and promotion rates of EPD staff from these groups. It should also include a system for tracking DEI-based complaints by EPD staff against colleagues and a clear training and disciplinary pathway for EPD staff who are subject to regular complaints. The plan should be in addition to the policies that apply to EPD staff by virtue of their status as City of Eugene employees. Can I get a proposer?
I will.
Thank you. Leah, can I get a second?
Second.
I hear Midas there. I think there was someone else, but it was pretty close.
Midas.
Okay. I'm sorry, Silveria. Would we like any discussion? I'm seeing no hands.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ibrahim.
So the plan should include increased mentorship and professional development opportunities for members of marginalized group. I think we are asking for equality here. And how would it be possible to increase membership of mentorship and professional development opportunities, focusing on one group, even, I mean, marginalized group, and excluding another group?
Leah, would you like to speak to that? Or that was my phrasing based on our discussions. So, you know, I'm not a member of this committee, but that was something that I think was discussed in the committee and elsewhere. So I'm happy to take responsibility for that phrasing if need be. But Leah?
I can speak to the intent, and I want to be sure I understand the question. I think what I heard you saying was that some concern about it being specifically for marginalized groups. The intent here is that oftentimes, the thought was that oftentimes people mentor people who are like them. And so without a specific plan, sometimes people from more marginalized groups end up not having those opportunities and not having the same professional development opportunities that people who are more similar to the dominant community have. And Kaz, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I mean, as I said, I'm not a member of the committee. I was just doing my best to transcribe the discussions that we had. If it's the phrasing that's an issue, as I said, I will take full responsibility for that.
Does that make sense? And if not, I'm open to any suggestions to make it more clear.
I think the intent is healthy in the way that it encourages EPD to be aware of people who may not feel like being at the right place. But in the meantime, we have to be aware of, we have to be mindful of not excluding other groups just because of who they are. If I'm a white person, white police officer, and I'm not having increased mentorship while I may have the same struggle and not having the same professional development opportunities, I think we are turning the table here. And at least my activism is about equality, where people get the same opportunities, and then build on that, knowing that sometimes, yes, some people need more attention because of history or a lot of other things, but within the police department, having increased mentorship without one, the marginalized community, marginalized group members feeling patronized, kind of like giving opportunity that they don't deserve, and kind of have an increased training or increased membership, and without this feeling, or the other police officer feeling like they're just being disadvantaged for being white, or that's my concern. It's just I see the intent, but the phrasing or I don't know. There's something about it that I seem out of place for me. So that's what I wanted to point out.
Thank you, Ibrahim. I see Marty.
Hi, yeah. So I get where we're going with this, and I fully support it, because it's not good enough to focus on recruitment if you have an inhospitable workplace, or if you are not having retention of the people that you're bringing in. However, I'm thinking, if I get hired as a trans guy on the police force, I don't want my officer that's working with me to say, hey, you're my token trans guy. I'm going to make sure to get you these special deals because you're my token trans guy. I think what I would look for is, instead of focusing on, because the police force is a little different than another workplace where mentorship kind of happens. It's regulated. Everybody gets assigned somebody who's in charge of that rookie, and your mentor is built in. So I think those people, and I forget the terminology right now, but I think those officers that ride with them in the car and show them how to do their job need to be specifically and intentionally trained in their bias and screening and opportunities for marginalized groups and awareness around these marginalized communities, so that they are getting the professional development and the advantages that Leah was talking about, that generally the people that are more like them get. And I did hear people who are representing EPD say that they do their best to have a diverse group of sergeants that do this kind of stuff. But of course, they're limited in how many people are in the pool. And it reminds me of in education training when we are trying to do anti-racist education. And, white teachers can do anti-racist education, and white teachers can make a classroom be a place where students of color can thrive. You just have to train yourself in that and be focused on that. So it might take quite a bit of rewording to reposition this motion in that way, but if it were me, that's where I would want the change to be, would be with the management being trained down.
Okay. So again, as I said, this was my attempt to transcribe some of the discussions that were had, and my apologies if I haven't quite hit the nail on the head. That's not a position I wanted to be in, but due to the fact that the subcommittee wasn't able to meet, it would be possible to just strike that particular sentence or part of sentence. The plan should include increased mentorship and professional development, etc. It could be the plan should include a metrics-based system for assessing performance if people are uncomfortable with that particular phrasing. I'm in a slightly odd spot here, as I said, because I'm not a member, but I've had to assist members in this. Leah, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that might be the best way to approach it tonight. And I realize that's just, there's a lot of things in that little paragraph there that I probably shouldn't have tried to put all together. So I apologize for that. I guess the one thing that I'm happy to take it out tonight with the idea, I don't know if that's something, that part of it could be revisited, or are we just sort of out of time?
We're close to being out of time, but I will say that if you wanted to include it in your testimony that you submit to the committee, then it would be on record that's the way that you wanted this to go.
If that's acceptable with the larger group, if anybody feels like we need to work on it, I'm happy to do that as well. So I'm happy with either direction.
Midas, you are the second on that. Are you happy with that direction of proceeding?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, and I see Ibrahim, is your hand raised from before, or do you have further comment?
No, I just wanted to say that I raised the concern just for us to be mindful that this is something that we don't want to convey, and either way, I'm gonna vote yes. I just want us to be mindful that we're not trying to exclude any other group when we are fighting for our own right as a minority group. And if it's possible to probably remove this motion and bring it back to the last meeting, I don't know how it's gonna be, but to reward or to just strike it or to vote it as it with the understanding that with the recommendation that the city staff may reward it and I don't know.
Thank you, Ibrahim. I'm conscious of the time. We have 3 more motions on the agenda. So if members are happy, I would like to proceed. And I also thank you for your understanding on this particular issue. Due to the fact that subcommittee didn't meet quorum, we've had to find alternative ways to make sure that members' proposals were able to reach this committee. So if there's no further comments, Ibrahim Hamide, you are muted.
Would saying after opportunities for all members, including marginalized group, would that capture what you're trying to say?
Ibrahim Coulibaly?
Yes.
Yeah. So sorry, one more time, Hamide.
So after development opportunities for all members, including marginalized groups, does that make it more inclusive?
Leah and Midas, are you happy with that change?
I think I appreciate the change and I see where you're going with that. I think I'm more comfortable with taking that out because we were trying to address a particular deficit, and I didn't do a very good job of that, so I apologize, but I don't think that rewording actually addresses the deficit that we had identified.
Okay, Midas, do you have any thoughts? Sorry, Leah.
I'd say as it's Leah's proposal, I would go with her, whatever she wants with that.
So as it stands then, we struck that clause, so it should read, the plan should include a metrics-based system, etc. Are we happy to vote on that motion? Please do let me know if there are any further comments.
Call the question.
Go ahead, Silverio.
Call the question. I call the question.
Oh, call the question. Right. Okay, let's vote.
Let's do it. And let's start with M's.
Yes.
Daniel.
Yes.
Betsy.
Yes.
Macy.
Yes.
Ibrahim Koulibaly.
Yes.
Leah.
Yes.
Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
Ib.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Silverio.
Yes.
Guadalupe.
Yes.
Rick Rosetta.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Sandra.
Yes.
Midas.
Yes.
And Marty.
Yes.
That's 17 yes and 0 no. So that motion passes as amended.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. So we're on to HT 104, motion on anti-bias testing. Research shows that police forces have not been very good at identifying bias in recruits or officers. The system in place to detect bias or white supremacy leanings were created by those whose biases have not been challenged. There are mechanisms to test for bias and they appear to produce a more reliable result. EPD should require current and prospective officers to undergo mandatory anti-bias testing, including testing for bias in shoot, don't shoot decision-making, and develop clear policy for considering an officer's level of bias in the hiring process, in performance evaluations, in deployment decisions, e.g. where they are assigned to work. This anti-bias program should be drawn up in conjunction with the City of Eugene's HR department and external diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants, and should have a focus on identifying and addressing white nationalist affiliations and/or a white supremacist worldview. Can I get a proposer for that one?
I do.
Move.
And that was Erica. Silveria, would you like to be the second then? Seeing as you
Please.
came in. Erica. Silveria, do we have any discussion? Seeing none, I would like to move to roll call.
Very well. We're going to start with M's.
Yes.
Daniel.
Yes.
Betsy.
Yes.
Macy.
Yes.
Ibrahim Koulibaly.
Yes.
Leah.
Yes.
Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
Ib.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Silverio.
Yes.
Guadalupe.
Yes.
Rick Rosetta.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Sandra.
Yes.
Midas.
Yes.
And Marty.
Yes.
That's 17 yes, 0 no. That
Okay.
motion carries.
Thank you very much, everyone. So we just have two more left on the agenda. HT 105, motion to create a non-sworn equity officer position within EPD. Managing the workload in these motions will require a dedicated staffing resource. EPD should therefore hire an equity officer. This person should have knowledge of police culture and procedures, as well as lived experience of being a member of a marginalized group. Their primary task should be coordinating the development and implementation of the plans outlined in these motions, but they should also act as EPD's point person for engagement with marginalized groups, advise on communications and strategy around crisis events, such as the shooting of a person of color by police, act as a facilitator for community input forums.
So moved.
Severia. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Guadalupe. Okay, any discussion?
So
I see Rick, and was that Ibrahim?
Yeah, my question would be, why a non-sworn officer rather than a sworn officer?
Leah, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah. So the recommendation is to have somebody from outside the system to help facilitate this, and to provide that civilian perspective.
And I would say that the definition as given does not exclude a former officer. Is there any other discussion, questions? Ibrahim, you were saying something, I believe.
Yeah, well, my question was, my question is, are we recommending that EPD get rid of the liaison they have to the marginalized groups?
That's not contained within the motion, and I think maybe Daniel, you might be able to best speak to what in your role as the HRC chair, to speak to what those liaisons actually do for any members that.
Yeah, well, currently what those liaisons do, and there are 4 detectives who serve as liaisons to marginalized communities, is that when there is a hate or bias crime, that that these detectives will reach out to those communities and serve as a liaison to EPD. That's an external facing role. What this is referring to is an internal facing role that would be a mirror into the EPD with respect to diversity, equity, inclusion. Is that correct, Leah?
Yes, and I think I think the liaisons have specific roles within the community that we would want to maintain. There's not an intent to replace those.
Yes, exactly.
Does that answer your question, Ibrahim? And then I see Rick.
Is there
sorry,
I'm sorry,
asking.
go ahead, Ibrahim. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, yeah, that answers somehow my question, yes.
And Rick?
I'm wondering if there's evidence that we have 4 liaisons, if there's evidence that those 4 are not doing their job correctly, and having this other type of individual involved would solve the problem.
Well, it's not that they're not doing their job. They are liaisons outward to the community. They are not working within EPD in that same respect. Right now, the VCU work group of the HRC is hoping to work with EPD to expand the role of those liaisons to go beyond just dealing with hate and bias crimes when they occur. But right now, those liaisons only interact with the community in the context of hate and bias crimes. It's not an ongoing, it's not ongoing engagement and relationship building in the same way that this position is envisioned here.
And Leah, is that a raised hand? You're muted.
Thank you. I think also it is not about those folks not doing their job, that they do their job and we want them to do their job. But we also, given the motions that we've made tonight, have increased the amount of work that we're asking the police department to do on equity. And in all the experience that I've had in various agencies and all the research that I've seen, if there is not staff specifically assigned to do that work, it puts an undue burden on the police officers who in fact have their police officer duties as well. If that makes sense.
Does that answer your question, Rick?
Not directly, but I'll have to live with it.
Okay, do we have any further discussion? I'm conscious of the time. We have 5 minutes left. No. I am not seeing anyone else, so Kevin?
Yes, I'm ready to go, and we're going to start with Marty.
Yes.
Midas.
Yes.
Sandra.
Sorry.
Sandra.
Yes.
Thank you. David.
Yes.
Rick. Rosetta.
No.
Guadalupe.
Yes.
Silverio.
Aye.
Brian.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Ib.
Yes.
Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
Leah.
Yes.
Ibrahim Kulabali.
Yes.
Macy.
Yes.
Betsy.
Yes.
Daniel.
Yes.
Ems.
Yes.
That's 16 yes and 1 no. That motion carries.
Okay, so we have one more. And if we do get to discuss this, I'm going to take just 5 minutes more of your time, if that's okay. This will be the last motion that we pass from Abdul Rahman regarding gun control. Do I have a proposer for this motion? I'm not going to read the whole thing because it runs rather long. Do I have a proposer?
So moved.
Thank you, Silverio. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Marty. And discussion. Abdul Rahman, would you like to speak to some of the elements of the motion?
Yes, I'd like to say this was one of the most interesting points I wanted to bring into this whole thing. I believe wholeheartedly that a nation with no arms lives more peacefully than a nation which is armed. The incident we see frequently, it leads to loss of lives. When we talk arms, we talk about an army. We have an army that defends the country. It's their job. They are trained. They keep the country in independent state. They defend the borders when they need to. But when we have arms inside the country, that means another army is within, which leads the police, which should keep the peace and order, should be armed to be able to control this lot. And this makes it harder for the police. And also, when the arm is in the hands of the civilian or the police, it ends up with the loss of one life at least, and it could be multiple lives. And a life is too valuable. People justify having the arms because they like to go hunting or shooting of some sort. But if I weigh the hobby against the life of somebody's lost, I think it overweighs, the life overweighs the hobby or the desire to use the arms. Therefore, we need a more of arm control over the process of owning or carrying. And I would like to use the city of Eugene as a pilot, a region, one county in the state as a seed for the whole country in the future. So if we can pass a motion to agree that we can make the city of Eugene, at least the public areas, free of open carry arms, I think we will be doing a good job, and hopefully it will be expansive. It will spread within other counties in the state of Oregon, and hopefully for the whole country in the future. This is my wish, and I wish you can see it this way.
Thank you, Abdul Rahman. Do I have any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. It's probably a clarifying question, maybe to the city attorney, or anybody here who can inform this. What would it take, and how this would um, um, play out with the Second Amendment right that people have? I completely agree with the recommendation, but how feasible is this?
I can speak to that a little bit. So it's interesting. The state statute occupies the field when it comes to weapons, concealed weapons in the state of Oregon. And so the city of Eugene, can only do what the state allows. And what the state allows currently, and the legislature is currently acting on this, and I don't know if it's passed both the House and the Senate, or it's just passed one of them, but there is something going through the legislature right now that would allow cities and localities to regulate people carrying that have concealed weapons permits as well. So it's actually broadening local authority to regulate the carrying of guns. But we are given currently under the statutes, it's the laws right now, to regulate guns of those that do not have concealed weapons permits. So that is something that is granted to us by the state. I did a little bit of checking just when I saw this motion. I just wanted to see, and there are some, and it might not look exactly like this, but there are some other cities in Oregon that have similar provisions. I think Tigard is one of them. Beaverton might be another. So this is not so out of our current legal authority that there can't be something that could that council could consider based on what's being proposed right here.
Thank you.
And then I see Brian.
Yeah, I'm going to be the unpleasant voice here. I'm going to vote against this, not for any of the reasons I articulated in the motion, but for the unfortunate unintended consequence of enforcement of laws like this. As we've seen with the drug wars, I mean, those laws were highly disproportionately enforced and oppressed upon Black and Latino people. And I see these kinds of laws, unfortunately, ending up in that same category. That even though most, if not all, of these mass shootings are done by white men, these laws are going to be disproportionately imposed upon Black and Latino men. And I know that's not the intention of the motion. I know that wholeheartedly. And I agree with the intent of the motion, of course, but I fear for those unintended consequences.
Thank you for that, Brian. I just want to add to what the city attorney said. Senate Bill 554, which is the one she was referring to, has passed the Senate, but that's as much as I know about it. Erica?
So
I see you.
I'm just, I'm as, I also I fully support and understand the intent of this motion. However, historically speaking, as indigenous nations, specifically here in the United States, that might affect a lot, because, as an Ecuadorian person, within my constitution, we had the right of resistance. But in United States, you don't have that constitutional right. However, you have the Second Amendment, and within the way it's written, it seems like the intent of that is to be able, that people also have the right to protect themselves. So I'm just worried about, I will not want to step in historical issues, like they say, because as much as we know that most of the shootings that happen, and it comes from people from mainstream culture. However, when we talk about in Eugene, the people who is armed are mainstream people, mainstream culture. And in the moment of like what happened last time, right? In last summer, most of the people armed on the streets were people, that they were specifically armed to produce fear to a specific group of people. And historically, this specific group of people have always not have access to this kind of protections. So I'm just I'm conflicted, because I also can see, when I think about concealed weapons and stuff, and I think in the cases that happened, for example, Charlie Landeros, he had a concealed weapon. They were concealed weapon owners. They had all the training. They were killed for having that right too. So there is a lot of things that come to mind when I'm thinking about this. As much as I want to fully support, I have talked with indigenous members from the community, and that would definitely
Erica, 30 seconds,
a
please.
lot of their their rights as as Aboriginal nations and First Nations from these territories. So I will not want to step in.
Thank you, Erica. I see Rick and Ibrahim, your hand is raised, but that may have been from previously. Okay, Rick.
Thank you, Caius. I think that the Ninth Circuit out of San Francisco, which is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, reversed the United States District Court in Hawaii, which allowed for the regulation of open carry. I think the distinction must be raised between open carry and concealed carry. And the Ninth Circuit, which is the most liberal circuit in the United States, held that the Second Amendment barred the regulation of open carry in the United States. And I don't have the name of the case, but I just read it the other day.
Thank you for the contextualizing information. I don't see any other hands, and we are over time. So I would like to invite a roll call on this one. And if everybody's happy to do so, we can then call it an evening.
Very good. Let's start with Marty.
Yes.
Midas.
Yes.
Sandra.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Rick Rosetta,
No.
Guadalupe,
Yes.
Silverio,
Yes.
Brian,
Only for the reasons I mentioned, no.
Erica,
I would like to abstain.
Ib,
Yes.
Abdul Rahman,
Yes.
Leah,
I'm going to abstain.
Ibrahim Koulibaly,
I vote yes.
Macy,
Abstain?
Betsy,
Yes.
Daniel,
I abstain.
Ims.
Same.
All right, the vote count is 9 yes, 2 no, and 4 abstained. So according to the motion that was passed a month or so ago, this motion carries.
Thank you for that, Kevin, and thank you, everybody. This is the end of our deliberations. It's been a real pleasure working with you all. I hope that the report reflects your discussions accurately. And if there are no, and I'd like to remind you once again, please get stuff back to us as soon as possible by next Wednesday at the latest. And if there are no objections, I would like to adjourn this meeting.
Thank
Kaz,
you
you
all.
were just as good as Mo.
Thank you.
Simply not true, Brian, but thank you for the flattery. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.